The wind screamed across the frozen valley. White snow rose like knives in the air, and the ground shook as sheets of ice cracked apart. The sky was gray and heavy, hiding the light of the sun. It was not a place for life, but still, some lived. Here, she held her child close to her chest, wrapping her long arms around the small body. The storm was stronger than anything she had ever known. Her people feared the ice storms because they could swallow whole villages, but today she had no choice. She had to move, or both she and her child would freeze. The mother's heart pounded as she looked around. There was no shelter, no cave, no warmth, only endless snow. The child in her arms was weak, his small body shaking. His eyes closed, and for a moment she thought she might lose him. "No," she whispered, her voice lost in the storm. "Not now. Please, not now." Her people were proud and strong, but not compassionate. Compassion was not a word in their language. They believed only the strong should survive. If a child was too weak, the storm would take him, and no one would fight the storm to save him. But she could not let go. He was her child. The snow rose higher, blinding her. She could not see more than a few steps ahead. Her legs were heavy, her breath burning as cold air cut into her lungs. She felt her strength leaving her body. Still, she kept walking. Each step was a battle. Each step was hope. And then she saw it. At first, it was only a shadow in the storm, a shape moving slowly against the wind. She froze in fear. Was it one of the hunters from the mountains? Was it a beast from the cracks of the ice? She pressed her child tighter, ready to protect him with her last breath. But the shape grew clearer. It was tall, but not like her people. It moved with effort, pushing against the storm as if it would not surrender. The figure stumbled, then stood again, fighting forward. Her mind raced. Who was this creature? No one should be out here in the open storm. It was death to even try. The figure drew closer. Through the wall of snow, she could see strange clothing, thick and heavy, covering the body. The face was hidden, wrapped with glass and metal. It looked fragile, strange, not built for the ice world. And yet it moved forward, step by step. The mother gasped. She had heard stories of outsiders, travelers from far away, from the stars. But she had never seen one. Some said they were monsters. Some said they were weak. None of her kind believed they could survive the storm, yet here it was. The human, the child in her arms, coughed, a soft sound almost lost in the howling wind. She panicked, trying to shield him more, but her arms were numb, her body shaking. She fell to her knees, snow burning her skin like fire. Her vision blurred, and she thought it was the end. But then, the human turned toward her. For a long moment, the storm swallowed everything. She could hear only the roar of the wind and her own breath. The human stopped, staring at her through the snow. She wanted to run, but she could not move. Her strength was gone. The human stepped closer. 1 step, 2 steps. The snow pushed back against him, but he fought forward. She saw his arms lift, reaching out. Her people would never do this. No one would risk their life for another, not in a storm. They would leave the weak behind. They would say it was the way of the ice. But this strange creature, it was coming for her. The mother's heart raced. Fear mixed with shock. Why? Why would anyone come toward her when death was waiting? The human fell to one knee beside her. She saw his eyes behind the glass eyes she did not understand. They were not cold. They were not cruel. They were filled with something she had never seen before. Compassion. The human reached for her child, gentle but firm, as if he knew the boy's life was fading. The mother wanted to resist, to hold tighter, but her arms no longer listened to her. Her strength was gone. The storm roared, ice cracking in the distance. A wall of snow began to rise, ready to fall and bury them. She cried out, but the human acted quickly. With strong arms, he lifted the child and pulled the mother to her feet. He did not speak her language. She did not understand his words, but she understood his actions. He was not leaving her. He was not leaving her child. The three of them stumbled, together through the storm. The mother looked at him again, at this strange being who should not survive in her world. A being who was fighting the storm not for himself, but for her child. Her heart, which had always known only fear and survival, felt something new, something she could not name yet hope. The storm screamed louder, and danger was still all around them. But in that moment, she realized something that would change her forever. She had never seen compassion until the brave human saved her child from the ice storm. The storm did not end. It screamed louder, tearing at the sky and crushing the frozen ground with waves of ice. But inside that chaos, three figures moved together: one alien mother, her weak child, and a human who should not have been there at all. She stumbled as the human pulled her forward. His grip was strong, steady, like stone against the storm. She had no strength left, yet somehow he gave her movement. His tall figure bent against the icy wind, protecting the child in his arms as if it were his own. The mother's heart battled with fear. She had been taught since birth, strangers could not be trusted. Outsiders were worse than natural, dangerous. And yet this outsider was holding her child with care. Why? She watched his every step, trying to understand him. His clothing was strange thick. Layers of fabric and metal, unlike anything her people used. Lights blinked on the side of his mask, and his breath fogged inside the glass. He was clearly not made for this world. Still, he pushed forward with a will stronger than the storm itself. For a moment, she thought he would lead them to safety. Then the ground split open. A sharp crack echoed, and a piece of ice collapsed beneath his feet. The human staggered, nearly falling into the darkness below. She gasped, reaching out by instinct. But even as his balance failed, he clutched her. Child close, protecting him first, his own life second. The mother's eyes widened. No one from her kind would have done that, not even for their own blood. The human regained his footing, pulling himself back with pure strength. His breathing grew heavier, but he did not slow down. He did not let go of the child. Something inside her shifted. They reached the side of a cliff where the storm was weaker. Snow swirled like ghosts around them, but the wall gave a little protection. The human stopped there, kneeling with the child. He removed one of his thick coverings and wrapped it around the boy. The mother froze. She had not expected this. He was giving away his own warmth, even though the storm could kill him. Her fear turned into suspicion. Why would he do this? Her people never gave without wanting something back. Was it a trap? Was he only pretending? She crouched close, her sharp eyes watching. The child's breathing grew steady, small warmth returning to his body. His head rested against the human's chest, as if he trusted him completely. The mother's voice trembled as she whispered in her own tongue. Why? Why do this? Of course, the human could not understand her words, but he looked up, his eyes visible through the mask, and she saw it against something alien, something her world had never taught her. His eyes carried no hunger, no cruelty, no demand, only care. To her throat tightened. She had never seen such eyes before. The human spoke. Then his language strange, heavy with sounds she could not repeat. She could not understand him, yet his tone was soft, calm, almost reassuring. It was the way a parent might speak to a frightened child. Her fear fought against her heart. Could this creature truly be trusted? Or was he simply strong enough to act kind while waiting for her to fall? The storm roared again, shaking the cliff. The human looked upward, then back at her. He pointed toward the distant rocks, then to her, then to the child. The message was clear even without words. We must keep moving. The mother hesitated. Her people would have left the human to die. Her people would never have carried a stranger's child. Yet here she was, following him through the storm. Step by step, they moved together. She no longer resisted his pull. Something inside her told her this was not a trap. Something inside her whispered that this human was different. And deep in her heart, she felt a strange heat, not from fire, not from shelter, but from hope. The human walked as if the storm could not break him. He carried the child as if it was the most natural thing in the world. And for the first time, the mother began to wonder. Perhaps this creature did not come to take. Perhaps he came to give. As the storm howled around them, she realized her world had always been built on strength and fear. But this man of flesh and blood, fragile and foreign, showed something greater, compassion, and it terrified her more than the storm itself. The storm did not rest. It clawed at the land like a living beast, screaming with winds that could cut skin and bury whole mountains. Yet through that endless fury, three shapes struggled forward: the alien mother, her fragile child, and the human who carried hope like a flame in the darkness. Every step was war. The snow was deep, pulling at their legs like hands trying to drag them under. Ice cracked underfoot, threatening to open and swallow them whole. The human moved first, breaking the path, forcing his body through the blinding white. Behind him, the mother followed, her eyes never leaving the small figure of her child in his arms. Her breath came sharp and heavy. She did not understand this human. Why did he keep going? Why did he carry the child as if it was his own? In her world, survival meant selfishness. But this man seemed to fight for something greater. The mother's legs weakened. She stumbled, falling to her knees. The storm laughed at her weakness, throwing knives of ice across her face. She thought she would sink into the snow and never rise again. But the human turned. He placed the child carefully against his chest, then reached for her. His hand was rough, covered in strange fabric, but his grip was steady. With one pull, he lifted her back to her feet. She stared at him in silence, heart beating fast. He had no reason to help her. Carrying the child was already a burden. Saving her made no sense. Yet he did it without hesitation. The storm grew wilder. A wall of snow rolled across the plain, a white wave that could bury them alive. The human looked around quickly, searching. Then he saw a crack in the cliffs, narrow but deep enough for shelter. He pointed, shouting words she could not understand. But his meaning was clear. Together they ran. The snow wave crashed behind them, chasing like a monster. The human pushed forward with all his strength, holding the child tight. The mother followed, her heart pounding. The ground shook, and ice split open at her heels. She screamed, but kept running. They reached the cliff just as the white wall struck. The human threw himself into the crack, pulling the child in with him. The mother dove after, the snow wave slamming against the rocks and shaking the earth. Inside the narrow shelter, the storm was still loud, but not deadly. The three collapsed onto the frozen ground, gasping for air. The mother clutched her chest, her whole body trembling. The child whimpered softly, then rested again in the human's arms. For a long moment, none of them moved. Only the storm's scream filled the world outside. The mother looked at the human. His face was hidden by glass, but she could see his eyes. They were tired, filled with exhaustion, yet still burning with determination. He adjusted his hold on the child, keeping the boy warm, keeping him alive. Her mind whispered doubts. Why? Tay? What does he want? But her heart whispered something different. T is not like us. He is something else, Suddenly, a new sound cut through the storm. A howl. The mother stiffened. She knew that sound. The storm always brought predators, ice beasts that hunted in the white. They could smell weakness. They could hear the faintest cry. And her child's soft whimper was enough to call them closer. The human looked at her as the howl grew louder. He did not understand the sound, but he understood danger. He set the child gently on the ground between them, then reached into a pack on his back. He pulled out a small device, glowing faintly with light. The mother had never seen such a tool. The human pressed it, and a sharp spark lit the cave wall, throwing shadows across the stone. Firelight. The beasts howled again. Closer now. Their claws scratched against the cliff outside. The mother's blood ran cold. She had faced beasts before, but never while trapped in a storm. Never while weak and helpless. Her people would have abandoned the child, maybe even her, to save themselves. But she looked at the human and saw no fear in his eyes. Only readiness. The storm still roared, but a different storm was coming. The storm of claws and teeth. The mother's hands shook. She had no weapon, no plan. Only the strange hope that this human, fragile and foreign, could protect them. For the first time in her life, she wanted to believe in someone else. She wrapped her arms around her child as the shadows moved at the mouth of the cave. The human stepped forward, standing between them and the danger. The storm outside was wild. But inside, something even more powerful was about to begin. The cave shook with every roar of the storm. Snow whistled through cracks in the stone, and the air grew sharp and thin. But it was not the storm that made the mother tremble now. It was the sound of claws. From outside came the scrape of ice beasts, circling the cave like wolves. Their yellow eyes glowed faintly in the dark, moving shadows against the white curtain of snow. They were hungry. The storm always drove them to hunt. The mother froze, clutching her child tightly. Her people knew these creatures well. They were faster than the wind, sharper than the ice, and crueler than death. No one fought them. You hid or you died. The human stood at the mouth of the cave between her and the beasts. His strange mask reflected the faint firelight, his breath fogging the glass. In one hand, he held the glowing tool that sparked flames. In the other, he gripped a sharp piece of broken ice, shaped into a weapon. The mother thought him mad. One faced ice beasts with so little. No one would risk themselves for others. Yet here he stood, guarding strangers. Her mind filled with suspicion. Why? Why risk his life? What did he want? Her people gave nothing without cost. If you helped someone, it was only to demand something greater later. Was this human the same? But when she looked closer, doubt wavered. His stance was not greedy. His eyes were not hungry. They were steady, filled with a fire that did not belong to her world. The first beast stepped into the light. Its body was long and low, covered in thick white fur that blended with the storm. Its teeth glistened like icicles. It hissed, crouching low, ready to strike. The human raised the flame. The beast snarled, backing slightly, but it did not run. The storm had made it desperate. More shadows moved behind it. There were 3, maybe 4. The mother's heart raced. She pressed her child to her chest, whispering soft words of comfort. But inside, she was torn apart. If she were alone, she would have run deeper into the cave, leaving anyone else to the beasts. That was the way of survival. That was the way of her people. But this man, this human, stood his ground for her child. The beast lunged. The human moved fast, faster than she thought possible. He shoved the flame toward the creature's face. The fire hissed, and the beast screamed, pulling back as sparks flew against its fur. It slashed with claws, catching the human's arm. He stumbled, but did not fall. He pressed forward again, driving the beast back toward the storm. The others circled, growling. The human turned, protecting the mother and child with his body. He shouted words she could not understand, his voice loud, like thunder against the storm. The mother's hands shook. She had nothing to fight with, nothing but her fear. And yet, as she watched, something burned inside her guilt she had never known. He was fighting for her child while she did nothing. Another beast rushed. The human swung the broken ice, cutting across its face. Blood sprayed dark against the snow. The creature roared, stumbling back, but another replaced it. The human could not fight them all. The mother looked at her child, then at the human. And for the first time in her life, she made a choice against the laws of her kind. She would not leave someone to die. Her eyes darted across the cave floor. A jagged rock lay near the wall. She snatched it up, her hands trembling. It was heavy, sharp enough to cut. The next beast lunged, aiming for the human side. The mother screamed and leaped forward, slamming the rock into the creature's head. It howled, falling back. The human turned, shock flashing in his eyes. Before he nodded quickly in silent thanks. For a moment, they fought together, human and alien, stranger and stranger. The fire hissed, the rock struck, and the beasts pulled back. The storm outside swallowed their cries as they vanished into the snow. Defeated for now, silence filled the cave again, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. The mother dropped the rock, her arms shaking. The child whimpered softly, but he was alive. They were all alive. The human sank to the ground, clutching his arm where the beast's claws had cut him. Blood seeped into the snow. The mother stared, torn between fear and confusion. He had bled for them, for her child. Why? She knelt slowly, her voice low and unsure. Why help us? He did not understand her words, but he looked at her, eyes soft, gentle, even through pain. He touched his chest, then pointed to the child. His meaning was simple, clear, because it was the right thing to do. The mother felt her heart twist. Her people had never believed in such a thing, but this human, he lived it. He carried it in his eyes, his wounds, his every choice. She held her child close and whispered to herself, almost afraid of the thought. Humans are different. The storm outside still roared, but inside the cave there was only silence. The ice beasts were gone, their growls fading into the snow. The human sat near the wall, breathing hard, his arm marked with deep claw cuts. Blood soaked into his strange clothing, melting small patches of ice. The mother held her child close. The boy's small body was warmer now, but weak. His eyes opened only for a moment, then closed again. She rocked him gently, her hands trembling. He had survived the storm, the beasts, and his own failing strength. But only because of the human. The thought made her chest tighten. She looked across the dim cave. The human leaned back against the stone, his mask half cracked from the fight. She could see more of his face, now skin pale from cold, lips tight with pain, but eyes still alive. He shifted slightly, glancing at her child, not at himself. Her mind raced with questions. Why risk so much for someone not of his kind? Why fight monsters for a child who was not his own? What did he gain from bleeding in this storm? Her people had no answer for this. Among her kind, weakness was shame. A child too weak to stand would be abandoned. Yet this human carried weakness, as if it was treasure. The child stirred, reaching a small hand out in his sleep. It brushed against the human's arm. The man froze, then smiled faintly, his eyes softening. Slowly, carefully, he lifted his hand and covered the child's tiny fingers with his own. The mother's breath caught. No one of her kind touched another so gently. Touch was for dominance, for control, for force, never for comfort. And yet here was this human, bleeding, freezing, dying yet giving comfort. Something inside her broke and rebuilt self in the same moment. The storm outside howled like a wounded beast, shaking the cave walls. The fire the human had sparked was weak, flickering low, but it pushed back the dark just enough for them to see each other's faces. The mother crouched closer, watching the human's wound. Blood dripped slowly, staining the snow red. She had never cared for another's injury before. In her world, you healed yourself or you did not survive. But when she saw his pain, a strange ache grew in her chest. She pressed her hand to the ground, searching the stones until she found a sharp piece of clean ice. She broke it carefully and pressed it to his arm, sealing the bleeding as best she could. The human winced, but did not pull away. His eyes met hers, and he gave a small nod of thanks. She looked away quickly, her heart racing. Why did that nod feel heavier than the storm? The child whimpered again, shivering. The human pulled off another layer of his strange clothing and placed it around the boy. The mother reached out, stopping him. "No," she whispered, shaking. Her head, "You will freeze." He did not understand the words, but he understood her eyes. Still, he pressed the clothing against the child and gave her a firm look, as if to say he needs it more. The mother's throat tightened. She had no words, not even in her own tongue. She had never seen such selflessness. The three of them sat close, the storm shaking the world outside. Time felt strange, long, and heavy, yet fragile. The mother kept glancing at the human, watching his every move. He seemed weaker now, but not broken. His spirit was too strong. The child woke for a moment and looked up at the human. A small smile touched his lips before he fell back asleep. The mother stared, stunned. Her child had never smiled in a storm before. Never something in her shifted again. For the first time in her life, she did not feel completely alone. Hours passed in the cave, though she could not count them. The storm never ended, but inside. A different kind of storm raged inside her heart. Fear battled with hope, distrust with wonder. She had grown up believing compassion was weakness. But here, in this dark cave, compassion was the only reason her child still breathed. The fire flickered lower, shadows stretching across their faces. The mother listened to the human's breathing, rough but steady. She held her child close, feeling his small warmth against her chest. And for the first time, she whispered words she had never dared to say aloud. "Thank you." The human tilted his head. He did not understand, but he smiled faintly. In that moment, the storm outside no longer felt endless. For the first time, the mother saw a path beyond fear. A bond had begun fragile as ice, yet stronger than the storm. The storm had no mercy. Hours passed, but the screaming wind only grew stronger, shaking the cliffs as if the whole world wanted to tear itself apart. Snow poured through cracks in the stone, covering the floor of the cave. The small fire had long since died, leaving only faint smoke and cold ash. The mother held her child close, his small chest rising and falling against her arms. He slept now, too weak to speak, but alive. Alive because of the human that the human sat. Near the entrance, his wounded arm bound with strips of his own clothing. His breath was heavy, visible in the freezing dark. Yet his eyes remained sharp, always watching, always guarding. The mother studied him silently. She no longer saw a stranger. She no longer saw danger. She saw a wall between her child and death. A wall built not from stone or ice, but from courage. Then the sound returned. A howl cut through the storm. Deep, hungry, familiar, Her blood froze. The beasts had come back. Shadows moved outside, long and twisting, their yellow eyes glowing in the snow. The scrape of claws echoed across the stone. This time, there were more. Twice as many. The storm had driven them mad with hunger. The human rose slowly, standing tall despite the wound in his arm. He pulled a metal rod from his pack, strange and broken, but sharp enough to cut. His other hand gripped a stone he had sharpened earlier. Primitive weapons, but held with fierce will. The mother's chest tightened. He could not win alone. Not against so many. The first beast crawled into the cave, its teeth dripping with frozen saliva, its breath like smoke. It growled low, eyes fixed on the child. The human stepped forward, blocking its path. His voice rang out in strange words she did not understand, but his meaning was clear. You will not pass. The beast lunged, the human struck, driving the metal rod deep into its shoulder. The creature howled, thrashing, claws raking across his side. He staggered, but did not fall. Another beast rushed in behind it, snarling, ready to strike. The mother's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at her to run deeper into the cave, to hide, to protect only herself and her child. That was what her people had always done, but she could not. Not anymore. She lowered her child gently to the ground, wrapping him in the human's strange cloth. Then she grabbed the jagged rock she had used before. Her hands shook, but her eyes burned. She leaped forward. The second beast slashed at the human's back. But before it could land the strike, the mother slammed her rock against its skull. It roared, turning toward her, but she screamed louder. Rage breaking through fear. She struck again and again until the beast fell back into the snow. The human turned in surprise, eyes wide. For a moment, their gazes locked. She was no longer the one he saved. She was fighting with him, and together they fought. The storm outside howled, but inside the cave, battle raged louder. The human swung his metal rod, sparks flying as it struck against the beast's teeth. The mother smashed with her rock, her arms aching but unyielding. They moved like one, covering each other, driving the predators back inch by inch. Blood sprayed across the stone. The beasts snapped and roared, but one by one, they fell. The human's side bled. The mother's hands were torn and raw, but still they stood. Still they fought. At last only one beast remained, the largest. Its eyes glowed bright, its fangs long as knives. It growled, stepping over the fallen bodies of its kin. The mother's breath shook. Her arms were weak, her body near breaking. But when she looked at the human, she saw fire still burning in his eyes. A fire that called to something deep inside her. They would not run, not now. The beast charged. Together, they leaped. The human drove his metal rod into its throat as the mother smashed her rock against its skull. The cave shook with the impact, the roar deafening. The beast collapsed, thrashing, then fell still. Silence. The cave was quiet again, save for the storm outside. Snow blew against the entrance, but the predators were gone, dead. The mother fell to her knees, breath ragged. Her hands shook, blood mixing with ice. The human dropped beside her, leaning heavily against the wall, his chest rising and falling. In deep gasps, they looked at each other. Not as strangers, not as enemies, but as something new. The mother whispered, her voice hoarse, "Together." The human did not understand the word, but he nodded. And his eyes told her he felt the same. Behind them, the child stirred, opening his eyes. He looked at both of them, and for the first time, he saw no fear in either face. Only strength. Only unity. The storm still raged outside, but inside the cave, something had changed. The mother and the human had faced death together and won. And in that moment, She knew. The trial was not just survival. The trial was trust, and they had passed. The storm began to weaken after what felt like forever. The screaming winds softened, no longer tearing at the cliffs with the same fury. The sky outside was still gray, but faint light pushed through the clouds. The long night was ending. Inside the cave, silence returned. The bodies of the beasts lay still, shadows frozen against the snow. The air smelled of blood and ice. The mother sat with her child in her arms, his small body wrapped in the human's torn coverings. He slept deeply now, safe at last. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths. Every breath felt like a miracle. The human sat nearby, leaning against the stone. His wounds bled slowly, his strength almost gone. Yet when his eyes lifted toward the child, they softened, glowing with quiet peace. The mother studied him for a long time. In her world, survival had always meant strength, teeth, and fear. The weak were abandoned. Compassion was weakness. That was the law of the ice. But this human had broken that law. He had given away his warmth. He had fought monsters not for himself, but for a child not his own. He had bled so another might live. Her throat tightened. She had no word in her language for what he had shown her, but she knew the meaning now. Compassion, the storm faded more, leaving only the sound of dripping ice. The human tried to rise, but his body failed him. He stumbled and nearly fell. For the first time, the mother reached to catch him. Her arms, once only shields for her child, now held the stranger too. She helped him sit again, steady against the stone. His eyes widened at her touch, but then softened into a tired smile. She realized then that the bond was complete. They had fought together, bled together, survived together, not enemies, not strangers. Something else the child stirred, opening his eyes. He looked at the human first, then at his mother. His small hand reached out again toward the man. The mother did not stop him this time. She let the human's hand close gently. Around the boy's fingers, it was a quiet moment, but it carried more power than any storm. The mother whispered softly, though she knew he would not understand. "You are different. Your kind is different." The human tilted his head, hearing the emotion in her voice, if not the words. He gave a slow nod, as if he agreed. Time passed. The storm outside ended, leaving the frozen land calm once more. The world was white, silent, endless. But to the mother, it no longer felt empty. She carried her child in one arm and helped the human with the other as they stepped out of the cave. Together, they walked into the pale light of a new day. The valley stretched wide before them, covered in snow and broken ice. To her people, this sight was only despair. But now she saw something different. She saw hope, because she knew if one human could carry such fire, such compassion, then humanity was not weak. Humanity was something her kind had never understood, something that could change everything. The child rested his head against her shoulder, smiling faintly in his sleep. The human limped beside her, battered but unbroken. She looked at him one last time, her voice low but steady. "If more like you come, the storm will not rule forever." He did not know her words, but in his eyes she saw understanding. And with that, the story of fear and survival became something greater. The storm had taken much, but it had given her a gift she never expected. A new understanding. Compassion was not weakness. Compassion was strength, and it had come from a human.